The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Good day, everyone. Welcome to Mailbag Wednesday on Fantasy NBA Today. I am Dan.nbsp. I am raring to go. Got the juices flowing, got the energy up a little bit. Your high voice gets higher when your energy gets up. And it is officially, basically, our last show without a guest until probably opening day. So that's pretty fun, although largely irrelevant to the topics of today. It is Mailbag Day. It is continued assessment of the Industry Pro 9-category Roto Mock Draft Day, and by the time all that is done, it will be end of the podcast day. Coming up later on this week, we will begin our pro-by-pro breakdown of that industry mock. We've gone through all of the picks here on the podcast by the end of today's show, and then we'll get thoughts on the actual picks themselves from the individual pros, exactly how they got to those, their thoughts on where they were drafting, what they were trying to build. It's going to be a really cool deep dive with everybody, basically. I think we've got scheduled interviews with every single person in this mock draft, I think. Maybe excluding the hoop ball guys, because we sort of know what we're working on over here. And that's going to be really fun, really illuminating. Let's dive right in. Number one, I'm at Dan.nbsp on Twitter. You guys probably know that already. This being a hoopball presentation, hoop-ball.com is the website. At hoopballfantasy and at hoopballtweets are the two Twitter handles. And if you should feel so inclined, please do rate and review the podcast on iTunes or the podcast app or Google Play or Stitcher or Spotify or iHeartMedia or YouTube or Facebook or whatever it is you're using to listen to this bad boy. Any positive thoughts, we would most appreciate them. Monday of this week, we profiled rounds 1, 2, and 3. Yesterday, we took care of 4, 5, 6, and 7. Today, I'd like to try to finish out the mock 8 through 14. Which I realize is a sizable undertaking, but we're going to get there because we're going to be efficient. We do not have a guest today. We only have a handful of mailbag questions. I whittled them down to my favorite. My favorite few, I guess. So let's dive right on in. Round 8. Am I doing this right? Yes, round 8. Goran Dragic starting it off at pick number 85. I have no problem with him at 85. Dragic is one of those guys that over the past few seasons has been consistently overdrafted, and his ADP this year is 63. So he's falling. His ADP is going in the negative direction. I love it. Of course, if the Heat end up with Jimmy Butler, that changes the outlook a little bit. But he's the guy in Miami that's always going to be on the floor, kind of regardless. Not a whole lot else going on at the point guard spot with the Heat. He's not as good as everybody wanted him to be. He's not a top 50 guy, but he's definitely a top 85 guy. Larry Nance Jr. went at pick number 86. I like Larry Nance Jr. He's a really good 9-category basketball player. He can't stay healthy in more than about 25, 26 minutes per game, so that caps him probably around a top 90 sort of guy. So this is about where he probably should be going. I'd love it if he slipped a little bit farther. I don't know that he will. But you kind of cut a little bit of that profit margin out. I think on a per-game basis, you're looking at a guy that could go higher than his typical top 100 sort of play, but I just don't know that he's going to last all year. But he's going to see some minutes. He has to. Although Cleveland, they're in the Jimmy Butler sweepstakes too, although seeming less likely than some of the other destinations. Not a guy that I'm targeting at the beginning of round 8, maybe more of a round 9 or 10 sort of guy for me, just to try to create a little bit of that profit margin, but I do like the player. Buddy Hield at number 87, that's a pretty reasonable grab. I think he's a guy that should sort of rise above it a little bit in Sacramento, but you know my stance on the Kings. No Kings allowed. Hield might be the exception to that rule. He might. His ADP is around 92 right now. That's about where we're seeing him going in most mock drafts. It doesn't seem like it's jumping or falling in any strong manner, but he has a really nice stroke. So if he's a guy that can get you outside buckets without killing your field goal percentage, if he's going to be on the floor enough, that's always the thing in Sacramento, he's a guy worth taking a shot on. I would say probably one round later, but we're real close now. Dwight Howard on a team that presumably is punting free throws, but in Roto, you know my stance on punting, so ugh. Zach LaVine, I got at 89. I think that's pretty good. I mean, we've seen him go a little earlier than that in drafts. His ADP's in the late 60s. This is another situation for me, much like the previous couple of rounds. I mean, the previous, 4 rounds, really. Round 5, remember, I got Rob Covington at 56. Taurean Prince at 65, Darren Collison at 80, and now LaVine at 89. This, to me, was a situation where I wasn't really hunting these particular guys, but they just kept falling multiple rounds farther than I expected them to. And you don't want to take those guys all the time because sometimes, frankly, they're just guys that aren't very good and they're falling for a reason. I believed pretty strongly that these are guys that are falling because they're just not that sexy. I guess Zach LaVine is a little bit sexy as a fantasy pick, but he's coming off a rough year, so he's falling a little bit. There's trust issues with his health. There's the situation of Jabari Parker being back, Chris Dunn being back for a full year, Lauri Markkanen taking a step forward. Does Wendell Carter Jr. do anything in Chicago? At the end of all of that, I still think LaVine is going to be your probably number 1 or number 2 scorer on this team, and that means he's going to have the ball a bunch. But like Darren Collison, that's not a sexy pick. He fell because he's not sexy. Rob Covington fell because he's not sexy. I think that this is all part of my Zag mentality this year, which is as everybody is sexy hunting in fantasy drafts, God, terminology on this show just gets weirder and weirder. As everybody is sexy hunting in fantasy drafts, we're going the other way. We're going for, Sarah Plainenthal, average Joe. We're going to be the team of average schmoes over here, and where we can find these values where average players are falling for some reason, you sort of know what you can expect out of most of them. There's a little bit more uncertainty with Zach LaVine, but I don't think he's falling for any reason other than people are like, stat set, not perfect. But Chicago's going to be running and gunning. Dennis Smith Jr. at pick number 90. Nah, I don't like this one. Jabari Parker at 91. I'm okay with that. Let's see, where is he going most times? I feel like that's pretty close to where he's getting drafted in a lot of leagues. He's another guy that I think in Chicago, he's falling, coming off of giant injuries. I'm just not afraid of the injury bug with him the way that maybe I should be. Maybe I should be more afraid of the injury bug with Jabari Parker, but there's going to be some room for him there. Jonathan Isaac at number 92. Yeah, okay, I guess, I'd love to see him fall a bit farther as well. He's one of those guys with big-time upside, but also, if they don't play him, you're ruined. His ADP's at 106 on Yahoo right now. That's probably closer to where I'd want to get him. Tyreek Evans at 93. I'm not that excited about him in Indiana. To me, there's going to be a fit thing. He's going to find some stats, but it's not going to be like last year. Harrison Barnes at 94. This guy falls into that same category of old dudes getting underrated. I hate Harrison Barnes' fantasy game. Don't get me wrong. He is he's the most... Forget Darren Collison. Harrison Barnes is the most boring fantasy player alive, but he deserves to be going earlier than this. He's durable. He gives you percentage categories, scoring and some rebounding late in a fantasy draft. This is too late for him. 94 is too late. This is a guy that, if Zach LaVine, I probably wouldn't have taken him because he is so boring, but I love these boring guys. Evan Fournier at 95. There's another boring guy that's falling too far. Jordan Bell finishes off round 8 for Team Jonas Nader. That was a big-time upside play, and he should see some decent minutes, at least until Boogie gets back. Rondé Hollis-Jefferson to start round 9. There's, again, some injury concern, but top 100 seems a pretty reasonable goal. My boy Thad Young, Alex took him. Alex, you dastardly fiend, at 98. This is pretty close to where he's going in almost every fantasy draft. Thad Young has an ADP right around 100. People have started to figure out that he's just going to do the same fun stuff every year forever. His ADP is 103, by the way, so industry pro draft, he went a tiny bit early. I would take him in the early 100s. You know that about me. Can't believe he's back. Can't believe he's falling into the hundreds again. It's absurd. Kristaps Porzingis at 99. I don't like it in a roto format. I don't like having that dead weight for half a year or more. JJ Redick at 100. There's another old guy falling. He's top 75 when he's on the floor every damn time. And in roto, that's great. That's all you ask for. Be good when you're on the floor. If you miss a game, fine. I'll pick up a dude and slot him in for you. I'll pick up a hot guy who's going top 70 for 2 weeks. I can throw a fill-in in there. Mario Hezonja at 101. I like this as kind of an upside play. Rudy Gay at 102. Same thing, kind of an upside play, although the acquisition of DeMar DeRozan does make scoring less of a priority for this Spurs team. It looked like if they weren't going to get a decent to good player back in the Kawhi Leonard stuff, that Rudy Gay might have a bigger role, but a slow-tempo team like the Spurs, there just aren't that many options, at least in terms of guys that focus pretty hard on one aspect of the game, right? We got DeJounte Murray floating around out there as kind of the third guy, but that's because he doesn't need to score to be effective. Timmy Hardaway Jr. at 103. I like this pick for Lord Welsh. Derek Favors, I'm not all that thrilled with my pick of Derek Favors here at 104, but I only had one center on my roster to this point, and so I had to do something dumb. And at this point, you're looking at Favors, you're looking at Kelly Olynyk, you're looking at Dwayne Dedmon as the centers that are going in this neck of the woods. And for my dollar, Favors just seemed the better choice there. We saw that he can coexist with Rudy Gobert. They paid him a bunch of money, so he's going to be out there for probably about the same number of minutes as last season. So I think a pretty reasonable expectation for Favors is close to what we got last year. He was top 90. He was number 88 on a per-game basis. He played 77 games. He put up some big numbers when Gobert was out the first time. The second time around, Rudy came back quicker, and Favors actually didn't fade all that hard after he came back. He put up close to 1 steal, a little over a block a game, 12-7, a nice late-round center as far as I'm concerned, and one that you don't have to worry about all that much, but still a fairly unattractive pick late in a draft. I think when you're stuck grabbing these centers late, you're in kind of a weird spot. There just aren't... Listen, we talk about position scarcity. I think there are more guards on the board late than there are centers. You know, we talk about point guard versus center battle. I think that you can escape with a late point guard a little bit easier than you can escape with a late center. These late centers are truly atrocious. The late guards, you know, at least you got a couple of names bouncing around that maybe have point guard eligibility in your league. Like, let's see, which of these guys might be able to play point guard? George Hill, probably a point guard, might be able to throw him in there. Colin Sexton has been going late, although, you know, I don't trust rookies. De'Aaron Fox, second-year guy, late point guard. There are point guards that are going to play big minutes, even if they're going to blow your team up in the percentages or possibly the turnovers. There are guards out there. There are point guards you can get that aren't just total kind of, well, turds super late in the draft. And in terms of centers, they're really long shots. The late centers going in this draft, well, we'll get there in a moment, but the late centers in this draft are really long shots. So anyway, wanted to scoop one up here. I think good advice to take away from this point, round 9, is that you better have 2 centers by the end of probably round 6. Round 7, you probably got a couple of options still floating around, but then things get real rough. Markelle Fultz went off the board right after me. That's a big upside play. I'm not taking that shot, but I can't kill anybody who does. Dwayne Dedmon at 106. He's another center that, to me, is just slowly going to lose time and definitely can't stay healthy, and he's hurt before the season even started. Elfrid Payton at 107. I don't like Elfrid Payton. Isaiah Thomas at 108. I'm not that thrilled about how much he's going to get to do in Denver, but they do play crazy up-tempo, and so there will probably be some shots available. He's just not, he's not going to be a facilitator like he was in his Boston days. Don't expect that. Round 10, Kelly Olynyk. This is an upside play if anything goes wrong with Hassan Whiteside. TJ Warren at 110. I don't trust the Phoenix Suns as far as I can throw them, especially guys that are now competing with some veterans, potentially, for minutes. Although, I think we probably see Ariza at the 4 a lot for Phoenix, and Warren at the 3. I don't think Ryan Anderson's going to play that many minutes, and if he does, it'll probably be as a stretch 5 when Ayton's not on the floor. Trae Young at 111. I think he's going to be a disaster in 9 category formats, but again, he's a point guard that's going to be playing big minutes. Carmelo Anthony at number 112. I'm okay with him going off the board here. Danilo Gallinari was my pick at 113. This is where you're starting to just take shots. And if Gallo plays even 45 games, especially if he plays them sort of close to in a row, like if we get news in December that he's going to miss 2 months, you drop him. He's not worth holding on to that long. Absolutely not. But if he gives you 2 to 2.5 months, maybe a turned ankle where he misses a week here or a week there, you're getting a guy that has, as recently as like a year ago, put up top 40 numbers when healthy. It's crazy to think that there's a guy who's been demoted from a top 40 fantasy asset to going in the 110s just because of health in a roto format. This is the perfect guy to have on your bench. You throw him in there because he's healthy to start the year, and you just ride that horse until the wheels come off. That's a terrible metaphor. It's mixed. It doesn't make sense. Dan, you idiot. Anyway, you guys know what I mean. Just ride it until the wheels come off. If the wheels come off and they're, far from the wagon, then you drop him. If the wheels just sort of come loose, then you hang on for a week or two and you dump him back in there when he's healthy again. He is going to have a prominent role with the Clippers. A prominent role, and nobody wants to touch him because he's going to be hurt. He is absolutely positively going to be hurt. It happens every year. He misses a ridiculous amount of time. But guys, on a per-game basis, because to me, in Roto, you do have to steer a little bit towards per game. He was number 82 last year, and he never really had his full complement of shots or minutes. He played 21 games, 15 points, 5 rebounds, 1.7 threes, ultra elite free throw shooter. He shot only 39.8% from the field because he never fully got healthy. This is a guy that if that 39.8 becomes 42%, if the rebounds come up a little bit with no DeAndre Jordan around, you're talking about a guy that when he's on the floor, if he's playing his 30 minutes a game, which he probably will if he's healthy, he is a guy that can easily get to 18 to 20 points a night, 2 3-pointers, 5.5 to 6 rebounds, 2 assists, probably about 0.8, 0.9 steals per game, half a block, and you might even see him take 5 free throws at 91%. That's a top 50 guy, but he's going to miss half the year. So go into it with the right expectations. In a head-to-head league, I wouldn't touch him ever. No circumstance where you take a guy like that in a head-to-head format. None. Roto, hell yeah. You got a games cap? Squeeze some top 50 games out of Gallo. The Rooster. Here comes the Rooster. Marvin Bagley goes at 114. I don't like rookies, but people seem pretty high on this kid. So, maybe I'll believe him, but I'm not taking him. Bogdan Bogdanovic at 115. This, of course, the draft happening before news that he was going to be out for about 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, which takes him through the opener of the season, and so I'm bumping him basically off my draft board. Somebody this late, if you're taking an injured guy this late, they better be really damn good. Now, we'll obviously cut Matt Smith some slack because the news hadn't broken yet, so no fault there. Boogie at 116 to Kyle McEwen. That's fine. I'm not taking him in Roto. I don't want to have that dead weight on my roster for 2.5 months, but this is about where he should be going. Jeremy Grant at 117. The word I'm hearing lately is that Patrick Patterson is going to really chew into his minutes. But if we see Jeremy Grant, this is an upside pick. If he goes out there and plays 28 minutes on opening night for the Thunder, you might have yourself a stew. So, fine. If he doesn't, then cast him off into the sea and start all over again. Alan Crabb at 118. I think he's going to lose some playing time with sort of a log-jammy situation in the Brooklyn backcourt. Willie Cauley-Stein at 119. I don't trust the Kings. Patrick Beverley at 120. I really like this pick as well for Jonas Nader. He fits into my old dudes getting underrated or my veterans getting underrated, if you want to call them the VGUs or the VGUs. Either way, this dude is a trademark OGU or VGU. I love it. He's a top 60 fantasy player when he's healthy. He's going to be asked to do a lot in Clippertown because he is a defensive monster. They're going to play fast as bleep. That was me censoring myself. They are going to be lightning speed in LA. Now they don't even have a traditional center. I'm Marcin Gortat, but I don't think he's going to play that many minutes this year. Beverly's going to play himself into an injury. It happens. The hope is that it's not season-ending. He was one of my favorite fantasy players in Houston. He doesn't score much, but he does everything else, and it's beautiful. So rare to find a point guard that can get big-time rebounds, assists, steals, a smattering of blocks even from a little dude. He'll knock down the three. He's not going to kill you at the free throw line. He will hurt you in field goal percent, but he's not going to take that many shots. Love it at 120. Perfect VGU here for Jonas Nader. Jonas, and this, by the way, 11, 12, 13, and 14, we're going to whip through these a little bit. I don't want to spend a ton of time on these last four rounds because this is shot-taking time, but I'm going to read off the names quickly, and then I'm just going to pick and choose a little bit which ones I want to talk about. Here's round 11. Jakob Poeltl, Bam Adebayo, Mo Bamba, Malcolm Brogdon, Trevor Ariza. Is that Shidi Osman? I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right anymore. Different one every time. Kyle Kuzma, De'Aaron Fox, Kevin Knox, Andrew Wiggins, Rajon Rondo, and Taj Gibson. My thoughts quickly here on round 11. I like Trevor Ariza at 125 a lot. He falls into that beautiful OGU bucket. He's a beautiful OGU bucket guy. I think there could be a nice season for Kyle Kuzma. The fact that he fell to 127 is good because he's aiming, I think, for a top 100 valuation. I got De'Aaron Fox here. I hate rookies and I hate the Kings, but what if he doesn't play like a moron rookie? What if? So that's a shot taker for me. Don't like Andrew Wiggins almost no matter where he goes, although with Jimmy Butler headed out of town, he could exceed top 130. I just hate that free throw. That free throw number is crushing. And he gets there a lot. Kevin Knox, that's a good shot take here at this point in the draft. And Taj Gibson, Tibbs is going to run his ass into the ground for 2.5 months. So milk him here early in the Roto season. Round 12. Kent Bazemore, Eric Gordon, Montrezl Harrell, Marquise, the Count of Monte Cristo, Jeremy Lin, Jaylen Brown, Dennis Schroeder, Reggie Jackson, Reggie Bullock, the Detroit Reggies, Dirk Nowitzki, Etuan Moore, and Jeremy Lamb. Thoughts on this round? Kent Bazemore at 133, fantastic value. I had him on my winning team last year. I got him late, and he's another OGU. He's going to be on the floor for the Hawks because they need stabilizers with all the young guys. And to me, he's an easy top 90 kind of guy, so at 133, simple. Eric Gordon at 134, I like that pick as well. We know he's going to be about a top 115 type of dude, so, assuming Harden and Paul missed some time, he could go higher. Jeremy Lin, I took at 137. I think he's going to be another stabilizer in Atlanta, although then we got word, it was actually right after this mock draft, that he was still dealing with some injury-related stuff. I thought he'd be healthy by opening day, but if he's not, then I would not have taken him here. Dennis Schroeder, there might be a little value for the first week or two if Westbrook isn't right. Reggie Bullock at 141. I like that as a 3-and-D guy late in a fantasy draft. Dirk at 142. He always exceeds his ADP. And then Jeremy Lamb at 144. I think Charlotte's going to give him a few more minutes this year. I just don't know how many. But this late, that's not a bad shot to take as well. Round 13. Karis LeVert, Nerlens Noel, Freddie Van Fleet, Mitchell Robinson, JaVale McGee, James Johnson, Marvin Williams, Avery Bradley, Domantas Sabonis, Malik Monk, PJ Tucker, and KCP. Thoughts on round 13? No real guarantees in this one, but I like JaVale McGee at 149 on the weird chance he plays like 18 to 20 minutes. He could average 2 to 2.5 blocks in that amount of time. It's going to really help your field goal percent. And if it doesn't work, you throw him away. James Johnson at 150. This I love. I love this pick. This is a guy to me that is old and is not the dude we saw 2 years ago, but he's also better than 150. Simple as that, especially if they thin the herd in Miami a little bit. Marvin Williams at 151. You know I love me some VGUs. Avery Bradley at 152. He fell to me. I think he's going to play for the Clippers if he's healthy. He's a Doc guy, right? He's a Doc Rivers guy. He was hurt last season. He's not going to be the top 50 guy we saw in Boston, but he's also not going to be the sort of bottom 150 guy we saw in, last year, Detroit and LA. He's not. If he's healthy, he's going to be more like a top 90 sort of dude. So you get him at 152, you wait for a hot 2 weeks, and you pair him up. You pair him up with a trademark top 50 guy, a name top 50 guy, and you get yourself a top 40 guy. These are the pieces you use to slowly upgrade the corners of your team. You don't have to run him out there every night, but they make for great pairings. Round 14. Markieff Morris, Colin Sexton, Mo Harkless, Okobo. Is it Ely? I don't want to mess that up either. Cody Zeller, Josh Jackson, Trey Burke, Rodney Hood, Josh Hart, Pascal Siakam, George Hill, and DeAnthony Melton. This round to me actually is probably better than the previous 1 or 2 rounds, just in terms of what might happen. Markieff Morris could put up decent numbers. Colin Sexton could put up decent numbers. I don't like my pick of Cody Zeller. That was an idiotic pick. I'm not paying attention here in the last round. Foolish. Trey Burke is a good flyer pick at 163 on the chances he holds the point guard job. Rodney Hood, nice pick at 164. He's going to have to score for a Cleveland team that doesn't know how to, outside of Kevin Love. Josh Hart in LA, I think eventually he plays his way into big-time minutes. Pascal Siakam, I don't know. I don't see him fixing his offensive game, which really limits his fantasy upside. George Hill, veteran getting underrated. He's going to play in Cleveland. They don't want to tank. So he's going to see some minutes, at least early in the year. And then DeAnthony Melton for Phoenix, because, frankly, he could take the starting point guard job, even though it's going to be in name only. Remember, Devin Booker's running that offense. I don't trust the Phoenix point guards. They've never been consistent in this run, and I don't think they're about to be, because they brought in more other guys that can facilitate, that can keep the offense in from being too chucky. And rookie point guards are not that. So I don't trust Phoenix point guards as far as I can throw them. All right, that's your Industry Pro mock draft. Rounds 1 through 14 over a 3-day span. Let's take a few questions from the mailbag. I tried to whittle these things down. I had about 6 or 7 really good ones, and let's see how many of those we get to before we just sort of run out of time a little bit. It's Super Stew says, can you give us some nice pairings of players from round 1 and round 2 based on Yahoo projections? Who complements each other in rounds 1 and round 2? That's a very good question. This really applies more, I think, if you're doing the center point guard pairing, because if you're getting a wing, they're probably okay at a lot of different stuff. I do think that the center point guard pairing is a really simple way to start your team. It keeps you from overlooking anything. It might not be your best path to victory, but it is your best path to avoiding defeat. And we've used this particular comparison before. Why don't I take big-time risks in the first 3 or 4 rounds? Well, a risk that pans out will help you to win. It won't guarantee it, but a risk that doesn't will guarantee you lose. So with that same thought in mind, going center point guard or point guard center in the first 2 rounds is not the worst idea in the world. It just gives you a nice, quiet base to build your team from. Now, that being said, how do you do that pairing? What if you're stuck at one of those spots where there just aren't any point guards or centers that you should take? Like, what if you have the 6th pick and your choice is Kevin Durant or Nikola Jokic? You have to take KD. His ceiling is so much higher from a fantasy perspective, but it also means that in round 2, you better take a center or a point guard, and you probably have to do that pairing in rounds 2 or 3. So I would say to It's Super Stu and anybody else interested in the same question, it's pretty simple if you're pairing round 1 and round 2. If your only goal is to pair, you go point guard and then center, or center and then point guard, depending on where you're picking the guys that fall to you. If you don't end up with one of those 2 positions in round 1, I would strongly suggest you get one of those 2 positions in round 2 and cover out the other one in either round 3 or round 4. So maybe my answer to the question is, don't worry about pairings in round 1 and round 2 unless the situation warrants it, right? If you have the 3rd pick, you're probably going to take Karl Anthony Towns in round 1. So round 2, maybe you look at a guy like Kyrie Irving or Kemba Walker or Kyle Lowry even. Maybe you reach a tiny bit. Presumably you'd have pick, I guess that'd be 22 coming back. Who's there at 22? Well, the best point guards are not, but like I said, Kemba, he probably is. Lowry almost definitely is. And if those guys aren't there, then you may have to look at that next grouping of them, the next chunk of point guards, which doesn't come for about a round and a half. The most discussed round in fantasy seems to be round 2. This question is from at Ben Lumsden 503. Additional thoughts on some of your favorite targets? He's asking about pairings as well. I agree with you, Ben. I think round 2 is an unmitigated mess this year. Total mess. The guys, by the way, with an ADP in round 2 are, believe it or not, Victor Oladipo has an ADP of 12.4, but we're going to put him in the first round for our purposes. Kawhi, Paul George, Ben Simmons, Kemba Walker, Joel Embiid, Paul, Donovan Mitchell, Kyrie Irving, Bradley Beal, and Jimmy Butler and John Wall. Those guys all have an ADP between 12.5 and 24. The guys in that grouping, and by the way, there really aren't many guys outside of that group that I would consider taking in the second round. I think the list extends as far as maybe like Chris Middleton, maybe Rudy Gobert at the end of the second round. But there's almost nobody else that I would reach for in that spot. It's a really hard round. But towards the end of the second round, here's the thing. I'm not taking Ben Simmons in the second round. Not anybody that could kill you in a percentage the way that he can, brutalize you, and also just not contribute in three-pointers. I know he does a lot of other really cool stuff, but you create a team build by drafting Ben Simmons. That's almost impossible to dig yourself out of. I know that there's a sexiness attached to it, but guys, he shot 56% at the free throw line on over 4 tries per game last year. He was one of the worst free throw dudes on the planet. He had a negative free throw impact of 3 compared to league average. In fact, as you go through all the names, guys, the only player in the NBA who had a worse impact on your free throw percentage was Dwight freaking Howard. That's right. Even Andre Drummond was a tiny bit ahead of Ben Simmons. So unless he drastically improves from the free throw line, he's a punt guy. Head-to-head, fine. But in a roto format, which is basically what I'm looking at, not drafting him. Kemba Walker, I think you could wait for him to fall towards the end of the round. Joel Embiid, same deal. Chris Paul, he's so good when he's on the floor that even though he's going to be hurt, you could make an argument for him as a second-round guy. I think Donovan Mitchell is getting overdrafted a little bit this year, particularly in 9-category formats. I don't see the upside in 9-cat the way that other people do. And so what does that leave you now? Kyrie, yeah. Beal, Drew, yeah. Jimmy Butler, yeah. Wall, nah. Second round is tough, guys. It's real tough. And if all of the guys that I said I'm not avoiding are off the board and you've got pick 23 or whatever it is, I might strongly consider just reaching a half of a round down for a Lowry, a Gobert, a Middleton. That's about it. Second round sucks. Only half of those guys, to me, are really worth it. We talked about Larry Nance earlier in the show. There was a mailbag question about Larry Nance, so we're going to jump over that one thanks to the earlier Lurie discussion. If Anthony Davis, this is from our boy Andre Lemos, if Anthony Davis is a consensus number 1, who would you pair with him at the end of round 2? This, I think, is a good segue from our last one. You're probably looking for a Lowry or a Kemba. Those are probably your point guards that are available at that spot. No, I don't think I would take a punt guy, is one of the other parts of this question. I think you'd want to get a point guard. Anthony Davis covers up all of these statistical categories. And he's a good foul shooter. I mean, he's not bad at any one thing. The only stat you really need to think about with AD is probably adding a few three-pointers and some assists. So a fairly standard point guard in round 2 is a really good spot. Although, if certain guys fall to you at the end of round 2, like what if Jimmy Butler falls with all this news about him? He gives you assists. You'd have an unbelievable team, and you'd have the first pick of round 3 at this point, so you could get a point guard and somebody else. But I would not punt. Not when you've got AD in round 1. You're so good at every statistical category. Punting is the dramatic opposite of what I think you should do. The people that should be considering punting are the folks that have picks towards the end of the first round where they can't get one of those 4 or 5 guys that helps a big way in almost every statistical category. If you're stuck with like a Dame at the end of round 1, you could, I guess, consider punting field goal percentage. I don't think I'd recommend it. Or if you're stuck with LeBron, let's say, towards the middle end of round 1, then maybe you think about punting free throws. If you've got AD, your team is so set in everything except for three-pointers right out of the chute that punting, well, to me, that's just nuts. Your base is so beautiful. You should be able to win or at least compete in a big way in every category just based on having that one guy on your team. Like, don't screw up any of your picks from that point on. Just be safe, and you're golden. You're golden. It's crazy. Here are a couple of highlights from our boy J-Ball Blogger. He was looking at the official ESPN mock draft. Andre Drummond went at 14, Depot at 20, Dragic at 37. I think that some of this has to be 8-cat, I would think, or points leagues. Dwight Howard at 39, Julius Randle 41, Wiggins 58, Otto Porter 73, and then some other strange numbers. Can I try explaining? Yes, I'm explaining because I'm pretty sure this is a points league. So if we're going off of ESPN numbers, I think we're hurting ourselves. It's either points or 8-cat or both, right? There's no other reason why Dwight Howard could possibly be inside the top 100 than not having free throw percent as a legitimate category. It's the only explanation. And Drummond at 14, although Andre was really good at a lot. Or Julius Randle at 41, Wiggins at 58. All of these guys that are way too high are guys that are terrible foul shooters, so clearly free throws are not being accounted for. Other question from J-Ball is, are you buying the DeMarcus Cousins mini hype? The answer is nope. They're going to ease him back in. It's going to be a slow process. I do think he plays this year. I'm not certain that Kristaps actually plays this season. I'm pretty sure Boogie will, but I don't want that dead weight. Someone else can deal with that. They can fall way behind in their league while using up a late middle pick to sit for half a year. I need my bench flexibility, guys. I need my bench flexibility. That's important. You got to have those roster spots. You want to be wheeling and dealing, making 2-for-1s, picking up guys. There are usually a decent chunk of super hot free agents that come off the board in the first week to 2 weeks of the season. You want to have flexibility. Your last 2 to 3 picks, those guys should all be flexible. And if you're sitting on a dude, you cut yourself down. The Real Brick says, what picks in the first round do you prefer? Also, what are your top season win total plays? Probably the LeBron leaves Cleveland. Everybody thinks they're going to be a 25-win team. I think they're going over. My Minnesota under sure looks good these days, doesn't it? Without Jimmy Butler, they were a 500 team last year. He was their whole soul. He was the soul of that team, and he's gone. I mean, I get it. He's hard to work with, but they just weren't that good without him. They didn't play defense. They weren't engaged. I'm not a Minnesota believer. Picks in the first round. I mean, to me, you really want a top 7. If you're inside the top 7, you get a guy that I believe this coming year could have a vastly larger impact on your fantasy team than the guys below that mark. And that top 7, of course, is AD. It's James Harden, it's Steph, it's KD, it's Karl Anthony Towns, it's Giannis, and it's Nikola Jokic. And Jokic, to me, is kind of a distant 7th. So it's 6, and then 1, and then you got LeBron, Dame, Depot as your 8, 9, and 10. And frankly, once you get past those guys, I don't even know what you're looking at. Then you're in a real weird spot. Do you dare risk a Westbrook? Do you risk a Kawhi towards the end of the first round? You might have to. Paul George, that's probably your 11 through 13. Chris Paul, Jimmy Butler, maybe. Tough spot. You really want a top 6. You really want a top 6 this year. If you don't, you're going to me, I think you play it safe after that. I think you try to scoop a Dame or a Depot. And then coming back, you try to get someone else that you feel is a fairly reliable player. Not rolling too many dice here. Too many dice. There's a way. There's a way around it, but it's pretty helpful if you have a pick inside the top half of your draft. Which player, this is from Kobe Shakur, which players would you target in the 22 to 27 range in a head-to-head league? Guys like Irving, Wall, Booker, Love, Gobert are too injury-prone, but guys like Middleton, Beal, Holiday, Lowry seem like boring picks, which might see their value going down this year. Pretty tough spot to draft. I mean, yes, it's not a great spot to draft. We just talked about the end of round 2 is a really difficult spot to be in, but presumably you have a top 3 pick on your team at this point. So you're sitting on AD or Harden or Cat or Steph or Giannis or KD or something like that. So you have a very firm base to build from. I am not as afraid of Kyrie Irving as I am of some of these other guys. I don't really much care for John Wall's deteriorating stat set. I don't much care for Devin Booker's bad assist-to-turnover ratio. Kevin Love, yes, in a head-to-head league, there's some fear that he might sit out the last couple of games, but I think he's being undervalued this season. Rudy Gobert, I think I would consider him in that spot. Middleton, I think, is going to have a nice year. Beal should be fine, despite the Dwight Howard thing. Drew Holiday, I think he should have a good year. Same with Kyle Lowry. I think what you work from there is you take the guys you don't like and you remove them, and then you take the guys that are left, and, well, that's your pool. But all of those guys, the one that I'd be worried about sitting at the end of the year is probably Kevin Love. So head-to-head, that's the direction you're leaning away from, I should say. And in Roto, well, I think once you eliminate the guys with stat issues you don't like, then the rest of them are sort of fair game. And we're going to keep the mailbag to that. I wanted to try to keep today's show around or under the 50-minute mark. We'd had some really long ones lately, and want to peel it back just the tiniest bit. And also give us a moment here towards the end of the podcast to let you guys know what's coming up on Fantasy NBA today. Tomorrow, Thursday, the 27th, we will talk to Josh Lloyd, the great Josh Lloyd of the Red Rock Basketball, the Fantasy Basketball Podcast. We'll be breaking down his team from this 9-category mock, and we will move from there. Seth Klein, we'll talk to him. We have Kyle McCune. I guess I'm getting ahead of myself because there's only 2 more shows this week. Josh Lloyd and Seth Klein. That'll be coming up Thursday and Friday. We'll get Alex Rickleen, Kyle McCune to start next week. Matt Smith, we'll be talking to him by the middle of next week. We've got the ITL guys coming up next week. It's awesome. We'll talk to Mark Roberts next week. I don't know if I may have just given too many shows again, but suffice it to say, if you're just looking in the not-too-distant future, Josh Lloyd coming up on tomorrow's show and Seth Klein on Friday, and that'll take us through the weekend, although Might flip that, air them in the opposite order. I don't know yet, guys. Just know that Josh and Seth, that's what you're going to hear the rest of this week on Fantasy NBA Today. What's going on at Hoopball? The draft guide is still for sale. Go find one of those coupons. We don't have one on today's podcast. No guest, no coupon. But there's a coupon in every single pod we've done with a guest over the last week and a half for $3 off the Hoopball draft guide. It's hoop-ball.com. Go get yourself a copy. Post haste, because the Brewski 150 will be in it in 5 days. Monday is the day. I wanted to do that for a long time. Monday's the day the Brewski 150 gets added to the draft guide. Go get it and retweet the discount tweet from the Hoopball Tweets Twitter handle, because that will unlock a better time to get the draft guide. Oh, baby. Hoop-ball.com, of course, the website, at Hoopball Tweets. That's where that discount coupon might be floating around as well. I am Dan Vespers. Hope you enjoyed this one. Wrapping up another mock. We'll start talking to the industry pros tomorrow. Have a lovely Wednesday, everybody. We'll talk to you then.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.